It was the coldest morning in 20 years. Snow fell heavily, covering the streets of Detroit in thick, quiet blankets of white. The city was almost silent, the only light coming from flickering street lamps that barely pierced the snowy haze. At Ei, the corner of an old, nearly forgotten diner, two small figures huddled together. A boy no older than 9 shivered in a worn coat, while his little sister clung to his back like a fragile toy. Their pale faces showed hunger, and their wide, tired eyes reflected a desperation that could touch even the hardest heart. Inside the diner, warm light glowed against frosted windows. The smell of bacon, coffee, and fresh pancakes drifted out through the cracks in the door, a tempting comfort just beyond reach. Just as the boy, Liam, began to turn away, accepting that hope would not reach them that morning, the door creaked open. If you believe in the power of kindness, second chances, and unexpected miracles, please like, comment, and subscribe to Tale Truss. Your support helps us share more real, heart-touching stories the world needs to hear. Inside the diner stood Miss Evelyn Harris, a woman in her early 40s with a heart far bigger than her paycheck. She had seen her share of broken lives, and this part of the city held more than its fair share of struggle. Evelyn worked long double, shifts at the diner often on aching feet and barely making enough to cover her own rent. But her mother had taught her a simple truth. No one ever became poor by giving. When Evelyn spotted the 2 children through the frosted window, something tightened in her chest. She didn't hesitate. She didn't ask if they could pay. She simply smiled, opened the door, and welcomed them in with a warmth only someone who had known hardship could give. The boy's name was Liam and his little sister was Sophie. Their parents had passed away in a tragic car accident just a month earlier, leaving them to navigate a broken system on their own. Evelyn started by giving them hot cocoa. Real cocoa with steamed milk, the kind that fogs your glasses and warms you from the inside out. Then she prepared 2 plates of pancakes, eggs, and sausage, the very same meal she could barely afford for herself. They ate quietly, their eyes wide and cheeks glowing with warmth. Evelyn never pressed them with questions. She simply refilled their cocoa and when they left, slipped a few extra pastries into a paper bag for them to take along. This didn't happen just once. For 3 weeks straight, Liam brought Sophie to the diner each morning. Evelyn fed them quietly, never drawing attention to it, and never asking for anything in return. Over time, she learned that the children were sleeping in a condemned building nearby. Liam had been doing everything he could to keep Sophie safe from being taken by child services, afraid they would be separated. Evelyn began saving what little she could spare, old blankets, warm clothes, leftover food, to help them survive the harsh winter. Then one morning they were gone. She searched the usual corners, even trudged through the snow to the building where they had been staying, but it was empty. No note, no explanation, just silence. Evelyn told herself that perhaps a kind soul had found them, offering them a better place to stay, but a small part of Evelyn never stopped wondering, never stopped fearing the worst. 15 winters passed. Life at the diner remained much the same. Evelyn's hair had started to gray at the edges, and her hands showed the marks of years spent, pouring coffee and wiping tables. She never married and had no children of her own. Still, thoughts of Liam and Sophie returned to her often, especially on cold mornings when the snow fell quietly outside. She would glance at the door, half hoping that one day 2 grown faces might walk in. Then, one rainy Thursday afternoon, as Evelyn was finishing her shift, a sleek black Bentley pulled up outside the diner. It looked completely out of place. Even the cook paused to look out the window. The driver stepped out first, dressed in a sharp suit, and opened the back door. From the car emerged a young man in his 20s, tall and confident, carrying the calm of someone who had faced many challenges. Behind him was a young woman with dark hair and gentle eyes that lit up the moment they met Evelyn's. At first, she didn't recognize them. Time and life had changed them. Then the young man held out a small faded paper bag and said, "You used to give us these." Evelyn's heart stopped. It was Liam, and beside him, tears in her eyes, was Sophie, smiling brightly. Liam explained how that single act of kindness, those warm meals, the cocoa, the safety she had offered, had completely changed the course of their lives. After disappearing, Liam and Sophie were taken in by a small shelter in another town. A caring social worker made sure they stayed together, keeping the siblings safe. Liam worked tirelessly at school, driven by a promise he had made to himself to one day repay the woman who had fed them when the world had turned its back. He went on to college and eventually started his own tech company. Sophie became a nurse. And now, years later, they returned not just to thank Evelyn, but to give back in a way she could never have imagined. Liam handed her an envelope. Inside was the deed to a new house fully paid along with a retirement fund. There was also a note from Sophie that read, "Because you fed us like we were your own when we had no one." Tears streamed down Evelyn's face as she stood there in her apron, stunned by a moment she had once only dreamed of. The cold, harsh world she had lived in for so long had finally given her a miracle, one she had never asked for, but deeply deserved. The customers in the diner quietly stood and applauded, some wiping away their own tears. The cook, who had worked beside her for years, wrapped an arm around her shoulders. That night, as Evelyn sat in the passenger seat of the luxury car, leaving the diner for the final time, she looked out at the snow beginning to fall once more. For the first time in years, it didn't feel cold. If this story touched your heart, please like, comment, and subscribe to Tale Truss. Your support helps keep stories like this alive, showing the world that even one small act of kindness can echo across a lifetime. We'd love to hear from you. Share your thoughts in the comments. What part of this story moved you the most?